And welcome back to Survivor 46 and 46. This is day 29. Day 29, and it's actually day 29. I just finished watching San Juan del Sur after pulling an all-nighter, after finishing the Kagayan podcast or around 10 o'clock last night. I just decided, hey, we're just going to go straight through San Juan del Sur. Natalie won, and this is a season that, I say that it's Gabon if Gabon was blood versus water, but I mean that as a compliment. And so I am joined today by Andy and Zucker, both from the org community. And I just want to, we're going to start how we always start. What were y'all's first impressions of the season when it first aired? And how has it changed throughout the years and any other rewatches that you have done? Zucker, we'll start with you.
So, yeah, when it first aired, I think it was around maybe a little less than 10 years ago. So I think I had watched it another time afterwards, but my memory of it was like a decent season. It wasn't, amazing like the one that you talked about yesterday with Kagayan. Like, that's a standout season. I didn't put it at the bottom of my rankings. It wasn't at the top. It was kind of just middle tier. But on the rewatch, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I found certain players that I had a kind of so-so memory of their gameplay. I was like actually kind of impressed, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But I had a more positive outlook on the season than my memory served me. So I'm very excited to get more into it later.
Andy?
Yeah, I remember really liking San Juan del Sur when I watched it. I think especially because I wasn't a huge fan of the previous Blood versus Water. And I remember being really nervous going in for it to be another Blood. I thought it was going to be like they pulled some amazing race teams, which they literally did. But I thought they just were going to pull from
they really did.
And it was just going to be, because I felt like with Blood versus Water, the pairs were lopsided. I thought it seemed like it was kind of like obviously half of them were returnees, but it didn't feel like all the pairs were really all compelling TV. And I felt like going into this, like, I was really pleasantly surprised with the casting and how a lot of the pairs seemed really balanced. And it's just like you kind of get a little bit of everything in the season, which is why I think I love it so much. You get some fun drama, you get great characters, you get good gameplay, you get a great winner story. And I just remember being such a Natalie truther during the season, and to me, a winner is so makes or breaks whether I like a season or not, which I know is rudimentary, but it's how I view it.
I get it.
And so I think it's really, and to your point, Zucker, I think it's aged like fine wine. I think a lot of people, I think it kind of, especially with it being around in that Cagayan Cambodia era, gets lost a little bit. And I just think the more you rewatch it, the more like kind of entranced you get by it. It's such a fun season, I feel.
And Andy, I want to go off of what you said about the first Blood versus Water, because, I talked about it 2 days ago, and I've always referred to it as my comfort season, and how, I kept saying, for the most part, the cast doesn't miss. I feel like with this season, with the exception of the Christies, which it's mostly this Drew, like, and even then, Drew Christie is memorable because of his boot episode, and Alec Christie is memorable because of his dirt face that he gives the rest of the game. I feel like, yes, and this is actually, I'm fairly certain, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, this is the last time we have 16 people in a cast. Like, it was never...
18. It was
18?
Yeah, because it was supposed to be, I think, 20, but then there was some of females that dropped out last minute.
Yeah, so in my head, this was 16, and it might just be because it flowed so fast that I just felt like it was. But even then, I feel like, yes, like you said, the pairs all had distinct personalities. Even the Christies, we had Wes and we had Keith. They're the Southern rednecks. They're also firefighters, which takes us to Jeremy and Val. One's a cop, one's a firefighter. We have Jacqueline and John from Michigan. I think they were from Michigan. We have Nadia and Natalie, who had done The Amazing Race. We had Kelly Wentworth. And what was his name on Twitter? It's from RHAP covering it. His name was like Farm Guy 69 or something. And but Dale, Kelly and Dale Wentworth. every couple has a personality, and that is something that I will say that the first Blood versus Water does miss out on is there's no distinct personalities with the couples, and it's not really a detriment to me because I do enjoy singular characters on that season, but here everyone. And the reason I say that it's Gabon, but if it was Blood versus Water, is because it is very clear, very early. There are probably 4 people on the show or on this season that have actually watched the show and understand what's going on. And we're gonna touch on those players as this goes around. But I know that San Juan del Sur gets a lot of hate, and I've never really understood that because even after my first time watching it, it's like, oh, it's fine. Every time I've watched it since then, it's like this is good shit. It's car crash television. You get rid of the 2 people that actually understand the game at the merge, or 2 of the people that understand the game at the merge, but that leads to the Natalie win of this. It just becomes a revenge tour. So we're gonna start with Natalie because Natalie plays twice. She could have played 3 times, but game changers. What are y'all's thoughts on Natalie as a game player, especially not really being like in the know with Survivor? And what do you think of her win as it compares to a lot of the winners that we've had so far? Andy, we'll start with you.
I think Natalie plays a really great game. I mean, she does get very lucky, for lack of a better term, with her twin going first. I think her getting to be a free agent in a season that centers so much around couples and she doesn't need to get targeted for that, I think was a blessing in disguise for her. But I think what's so great about her game is that, one, the revenge tour is amazing. I love a good pulled off revenge tour, and she knows when to wait, when to hit the gas, when to pump the brakes, which I think is a mark of a great player. But I also think she never wavered from her own personal game plan, even if things weren't going her way. I think a lot of people, if you think to the Alec boot, where John wins immunity that round, she had set up this really grand plan in her head where she could get John this round, and it would have worked out had he not won. And she still kind of made, lemonade out of lemons. She always knew to do something to further her game and keep herself in a good position. So I think that that's a really strong kind of check mark for her. I think compared to other winners, I think she's pretty up there. I don't think she plays a true, it's a very reactionary game more so than proactive, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I think it's a fact of the matter is that I think she really kind of let people mess up and do their things for a lot of times, and then she kind of snuck her way through. But I'd say she's a pretty definitely top half, definitely maybe top quarter winners for me.
Zachary?
Yeah, I agree. My first impression of Natalie was from Amazing Race, and I remember her being again a little more brash, again kind of aggressive out there, which again by nature maybe the Amazing Race puts you in that position. But I didn't have at the time of watching it when the season aired, I wasn't too, I wasn't too much thinking, oh, she's going to really do too well in this game if she plays a similar game as the Amazing Race. But I was, again, impressed with just how she was able to kind of tone down her game, again, react when she needed to, and kind of just listen when she needed to. Again, like Andy said, I think benefited from her loved one going out right away. And I think complementing to the first Bloodwater, the people who kind of go the farthest, their loved ones, again, go early. And I think, again, you don't have that extra person that you are tied to. You can kind of just play your own game. So I think, again, she made the moves when she needed to. I think she, sat back when she needed to. I think, again, she got herself ingratiated with a solid alliance and had her eyes on the prize, which was, I'm going to make this move when I have to, but not make it as soon as she could, waiting for that right time. So I was impressed with just, again, the timing of her moves on top of the moves themselves. In terms of her kind of ranking with all winners, again, I wouldn't put her at the very top. She's not, doesn't have the kind of dominant game that a Kim Spradlin has, but also isn't kind of one of those what the fuck winners like like a Bob Crowley or someone like that. So she definitely holds her own. So yeah, I think overall you look back on her and her game, I think she's a very solid winner. And I think of the cast itself, like you said, a lot of this cast you could very much tell hadn't seen or watched Survivor before. So to have someone who knows the game and was able to again make those moves and stand out the way she did, I think is a good representative of the season.
Well, and it's funny because Jeff, right after the Jeremy vote, the tribal after the Jeremy vote, where I believe Wes goes home, I'm fairly certain that's where Wes goes home. Jeff says, you guys voted out 2 people that were potentially going to win the game. Times that Jeff just straight up says, oh man, you voted out people that knew what was going on. That's basically what he's saying. It's like, okay, now I've got a bunch of J-Brones. What's going to happen now? And I feel like when the confessional that Natalie has after the Jeremy vote, where she basically says, my goal is to get rid of John, and I need to figure out when to do it, is, winners edits and all of that. But I'm like, that is the moment. If you're looking for a moment, it's like it's that her saying, my goal is to get rid of John. And if I can do that, then it's clear sailing. And the fact that Natalie, once again, she does not catch a single vote all season. And if this was a regular season, Reed still votes for Jacqueline, but like if John and Baylor vote with their actual conscience, they probably vote for Natalie, and we get, not a perfect winner, but 1 vote from a perfect winner. Whatever that means, whatever perfect winner means. I think that her big moves, and I'm not a big moves person. Everyone knows that I'm not a big moves person. It's all about the social game. But her big moves this season were her forgetting to vote to vote one way during the Alec vote. And she's sitting there like she plays it off very well in the actual tribal. And then when they go get their torches, she just sits there and smiles. And I'm just like, oh, like that is such a great moment. And then 2, obviously, is the idol play at Final 5, which for my mind, like, yeah, it's not all time. It's not the best. It's probably top 5 for me, just because of the showmanship that goes behind it. Of Jackie, did you vote for who I told you to vote for? And everything that goes into that, and Missy thinking, oh, I'm going home. Yeah. It's like, do you really think you were the perfect person to be here? I understand that there's a bug right in front of me. I understand that this cast for the most part doesn't get it. But do we feel like Natalie, do you think she caught on quicker than these other players in this season as far as how to we don't know who was for the most part, we don't know who was a recruit and who wasn't, compared to the other people that we feel were recruits. Do we feel like Natalie adjusted better than a lot of them? Either one of you can answer.
Yeah, I'll start. I think absolutely. I think, for the most part, you don't win the game by just sheer luck. Yeah, there's obviously luck involved, but you have to do something right, whether it's, again, social game, strategic, physical, some combination of that. So she definitely picked on to, how to stand out to ultimately get the respect and the votes of the jury, but not so much that she'd be a target like a Josh or a Jeremy were in the early merge. So she did something right. And, I think, again, it's evidenced by her social game, which was never having John catch on to her ultimate scheme, which was to get him out, to, kind of flip-flopping within that core alliance between, getting John out, at Final 6, and then using Missy to get Baylor out at Final 5. So, using her relationships, using her strategic play to make those moves in a way that, on the surface might not be the most, elaborate move in the history of the game. But again, the showmanship, the, to claim that move as your own unequivocally and, have the jury see that at Tribal and have no doubt about this is the move that Natalie made. So yeah, I think that she, definitely caught on to the game and did so better than anyone in this particular season.
Andy, how did she outlast these big fans? Kelly Wentworth, Drew tries to throw a challenge because Kelly's such a big fan of the season. Jeremy and Josh are targeted because they are big of the show. They're targeted because they're big fans of the show. How is Natalie able to not only, survive, and last longer than them, but be able to do it in a way where she almost plays the perfect game? How is she able to beat these super fans in an era where we see it in one world where it's Kim and Troyzan and one other person, Colton, where it's very clear they've watched the show, and Kim, all she has to do is to say, okay, yeah, just follow it. Like it's very easy to navigate when you know what's going on. How is she able to flip it? And, yes, she wasn't on the right side of the numbers for the Jeremy vote, but how is she able to get through this game as a non-fan on a season that has super fans, and she still be looked at as, you said top quarter winner. How is she able to do that?
Well, I think part of it also, I was thinking back to when she kind of reverts back to her Amazing Race self and yells at John Rocker pre-merge. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if I'm going to give her credit for that. But she definitely, I think, like, made herself seem like less of a, like, savvy player. Like, she definitely comes across as a little bit more emotional. I think she does that a little bit at the beginning. And I think that maybe set herself up to not be seen as much of a, like, gamer per se. I think anybody would also not look like a gamer compared to like Josh and Reed, who are like the gamiest gamers of all time, it seemed like. But I think it was, like Zucker said, it was her social game. I think like if you look to the West vote, her telling John to play the idol is like, I mean, that was like a win-win for her. If she's right, then John's forever in her debt. If she's not and John plays it anyway, then she's wasted the idol of her number one target in the game. Like I think she knew that she had to really rely on being kind of like that calming presence, especially with Missy and Baylor, keeping them close. She just knew the importance of having a number one outside of your blood versus water number one. And I think that, again, I think was to her twin leaving, but also I think she just knew that if she could keep people trusting her and relying on her and she just understood that was going to like be what went out for her in the end, was having those like little sneaky side relationships that nobody really saw coming.
And obviously, as you watch this season, you can't help but compare it to the first one. And there's a lot of correlation that I was picking up on this time around. We talked a couple of days ago about how the final three, all of their loved ones went pre-merge, and how they all are shown having moments of vulnerability. I'm sad that this person's going, and then they have a moment where it's like, okay, now this is me. Like I'm out here playing by myself. And then on the other hand, we have Sierra, who hates the fact that her mother gets back in the game, because it's like, oh man, now I have to play with her and I just want to be free. And I feel like the biggest comparison for Sierra is Kelly Wentworth in the season, because she, in her vote out confessional, she says, I kind of wish I didn't play this game with my dad. And it's like, yeah, I get that, because you don't have that moment where it's like, okay, dad's gone, now I can focus on myself. As compared to Natalie, who her sister goes, and she is shown to be very sad about it, but she is able to pick herself up by her bootstraps, as people say, and play the game for herself to the point where she bonds with an actual person in the game that's not a family member. And when they go home, that's when she actually gets pissed off to the point where she goes on a revenge tour. She doesn't go on a revenge tour when Nadia's gone.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, okay, Nadia's gone. I'm sad about it. Let's move on. When Jeremy's gone, it's like all these people have to go, and it has to be John that suffers my actual wrath. And I find that so fascinating in these blood. And someone texted me last night and asked me, between Blood versus Water, fans versus favorites, and maybe heroes versus villains. Which theme would you want back? And I'm like, blood versus water. I would say blood versus water because you get the first blood versus water. I feel like it was a very different dynamic, not just because there were returnees, but I feel like it was still a very different dynamic than San Juan del Sur. And if we got another blood versus water, I think I would rather have returnees just because. But I think that the gameplay, and I feel Jeff tries his damnedest to get us to be more emotionally invested in these couples than in blood versus water, because he's always trying to, how does it feel, Aris, that you like have to do this against Vetus, who like bullied you and stuff. Here, I feel like he's still trying to get that same reaction out of us, and I don't feel anything this time around. I don't care that they're family members. But I feel like that blood versus water dynamic adds that extra element that we kind of need this season, especially when it comes to Natalie as the winner. Touching on other couples, you brought up Rocker. We can just get the Rocker thing out of the way. I brought this up during like 4 different episodes at this point, but the fact that John Rocker tried to lie and say he wasn't a former player by naming a former baseball player. Oh, I'm John Wetland. It's like, you mean John Wetland that pitched for the Yankees? That's weird. My opinions on John Rocker this season are, yes, I'm not a John Rocker person, but I do think he was kind of provoked by Val goes home and Jeremy gets pissed off and tells his tribe, and Natalie, being the forever antagonist, antagonizes John and like sets him off, that makes him say the stuff that he's going to say. And like, he was all like, John Rocker is a piece of shit. It's fine. Yeah. Natalie does set him off in a way that's like, oh, look, you see? Did we think... Did you guys know who John Rocker was before this?
Yeah. I grew up, I'm a big Met fan, so late 90s, early 2000s, I was young, but I still remembered him and, knew his whole backstory. So I didn't know who he was. I knew he was a hothead, all that. But like you said, Andrew, which was, I think he kind of got like a little bit of the short end of the stick again, because he really did all he could to save Val, as he told Jeremy he would. Not his fault that Val lied and didn't have the 2 idols she said she did. So he can't, do anything about that. And without that information, Jeremy reacts the way he does. Natalie reacts. So it was just kind of a domino effect of sorts. I think, his personality aside, I think he had like somewhat of a good footing with the game. He kind of knew, how to play the game, how to kind of work his alliances. He found an idol, just, again, like many others, just kind of should have played it when he didn't, and he paid the price. But, I don't think we maybe want to see him come back, but I think in an alternate universe, it would be interesting to see him play with a little more of an opportunity than he kind of had in this particular season.
Andy, what did you think of Rocker? Like, you didn't have to know about him, but like, what did you think of Rocker? Jeremy, I mean, it's so funny to watch them edit around what Jeremy actually says.
Right.
Because in the preview for the episode, it's like, oh man, he said this and racist stuff. And like, and then you actually get to the moment. He was like, he said a lot of racist and homosexual stuff, and it's like, oh man, like, and you can't edit around that. But like, and it's just a flub on Jeremy's part, because we all know what he's trying to say. But it was funny to see how they try to edit around that, so that when it got to that point in your heads, you don't hear what Jeremy's actually saying. He said a lot of racist and homosexual stuff. It's like, you mean homophobic, but whatever. What were your thoughts on Johnny Rock, as he refers to himself?
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on Johnny Rock this season?
I mean, all good points. I do think he really did like have a mind for the game more than a lot of this cast was just saying something. I don't know. I just think like he should have known from, this was the era of like the pseudo stunt casting, and he should have looked back, I think, and seen how it did or didn't work out for other people who didn't really reveal their kind of like true Like it's gonna come out eventually, and like Keith clocks him like minutes into the game starting, so like people were always going to like know his past and know where he was coming from, and I don't think he did like the best job at preempting that, which I think was maybe part of it. But I mean, it's just kind of a classic like play your idol, dude. Like you're getting called out publicly, like you can't think that that's not going to potentially have ramifications, especially with how like messy that pre-merge tribe was with their code switching and utter lack of like strategic gameplay at all.
They last season, Kageon, the Brains tribe, I think Spencer has the moment where he says this is one of the worst pre-merge tribes ever. It's like you're not even in the top 5, and I would put the Onapu. They were the Onapu tribe in this one, right?
They're Koyopa.
It was Koyopa that was kept on losing. Okay,
yeah.
So the Koyopa tribe I would put them up there with the Oolongs of the world as far as like horrible, because they and obviously we find out later that it's because the other tribe has been eating all their rice and they're just more nourished than everyone else. Going back to the recruits thing, there are a couple moments in the first episode which kind of lays home at least the Christie brothers. Either Drew or Alec. No. It wasn't. It was John. It was John, not Rocker. John loses the Flint.
Oh yeah.
And he says, "Oh man, people are gonna think I'm Jatia," and it's like, no, they're not. Like that just shows that you have watched a season already. You've watched Kageyan because it just happened. And they're gonna think I'm Jatia, and they're gonna be so upset with me that I lost the Flint. It's like that's not how this works, and that's the person that you're comparing yourself to based off the fact that you've only watched one season. The reason I was thinking about the Christies is because I think the challenge that they try to throw is the exact same challenge that and someone correct me if I'm wrong in the actual comments on the actual video, is the challenge that the Braun tribe tries to throw when they try to get out Cliff.
I think it was similar. The only difference was at the very end, it was, I think there was like in Kageyan, they shot like a basketball. It was like into a net.
Yeah.
This one was like a ring to hook into.
Yeah.
But it was a very similar challenge up to that point, right?
Drew is sitting there saying, "Oh, we've got to get rid of Kelly because she's a fan of the show." It's like, well, that shows what you are. And he has all these moments that episode where he's like, "I'm the one running this." And it's very clear that he's antagonizing Jeremy specifically, because Jeremy's just like, "You're crazy, and why are we doing this? I want to go after Keith." And all of a sudden, Drew gets blindsided, and his vote out confessional is like, "I knew the women were against me." It's like, well, no, that's not really it. You kind of put yourself in this situation, but sure, you say what you're gonna, and that is a fascinating thing with this era of Survivor. The fact that, it's recruits and it's people that know the show. And, not only are people now being targeted for being, physical threats or strategic threats, now they're being targeted for being fans of the show. Yeah. I feel like I know what both of y'all's answers are, and we don't have to really go in depth with it. But is that fair or foul?
I think it's just like, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty like weak. You know what I mean? It's like it's hard to watch because you're watching because you're a fan. Like, do you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like you understand in the meta of the current season, sure. Like you need a reason to point a finger at somebody, and it's easy to do that. But it's so womp womp to watch. I feel, especially as a fan, you're just kind of like, oh, like it just makes you. It kind of makes you feel crap. And if you were to like want to audition, you're like, okay, cool. Like, you're just going to be like immediately targeted because it seems like you're somebody who sits on the couch and watches the thing.
Yeah. So, I think just from like you said, a fan perspective, again, like you envision yourself out there, and, it wouldn't be, if you were in that position, it wouldn't be great to, study and plan for and prep for the game. And then just, because you have some knowledge, all right, now you're a target. But from just an outside fan's perspective, just watching the season itself, I think it actually makes a season like this more interesting because it's a bit more unpredictable. You can kind of envision, if everyone is assumed to know the game and know what the textbook right move is, you can kind of anticipate what the moves will be. But when someone has no basis for what should be done and they're doing things based off pure emotion or again, something that just happened the last day, it could be as superficial as, oh, they didn't take me on reward, I'm going to vote them out next. Like, that's not how you should play a game, but that's how often these types of seasons operate. And I think it just makes it more entertaining as it's just a pure fan perspective. So it's good and bad, depending on how you look at it.
I want to talk about Jeremy for a second, because this is Jeremy 1.0. And Jeremy's one of my all-time favorite winners. I love Jeremy. But what I'm starting to realize, and I know what's going to happen in a couple of seasons and then what's going to happen in 40, Jeremy does kind of act out in certain situations. And if we work our way backwards, I feel like at Winners at War, the only reason he doesn't vote for Tony, one, yes, he's good with Natalie. Like, they're close, but I think he's annoyed with how Ben answers certain questions, or Ben asks and says certain things at that final tribal, and I could be mistaken. I feel like in Second Chances, he has this whole moment with Kimmy. Like, I feel like it was warranted, but it also got called out during his final tribal in Cambodia of like, why did you get so like Kimmy? And then here, the fact that he gets so he's so gung-ho on the Natalie thing. It's like, and I feel like a lot of where his vote comes from is the fact that Natalie wasn't a part of his blind side. But just also, the fact that he has this really, it's not a nasty rivalry with Josh. I think it's actually a pretty fun rivalry. And the Ponderosa episodes shows that they got really close because Jeremy's brother is gay, I believe. Jeremy is a great player, and I think that he established himself as that too early this season. And the same with Josh, but we'll just focus on Jeremy here. Jeremy's a great player. I feel like he established himself too early. Do you think there was a way at that merge that Jeremy could have fallen below the radar to potentially navigate himself through the game? Or do you think that he was always going to be a target because at that point people knew that he was this big fan? Zucker, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but just from the show that we saw, I don't think there was probably much he could have done because his threat was already, established as a pretty high threat level pre-merge. So, to kind of just downplay that and just kind of change people's perspectives, it's a tall, order to fill. Again, you can look at little things like maybe if he. However, I think if he didn't win that first, well, it was actually the second immunity, but if he didn't win the first one going into a vote, I think he would have been the target anyway. So you could argue if he didn't win and increase his threat level, but like you said, I think the numbers and having so many loved one pairs still in the game, I just think the numbers were just stacked against him either way. Maybe a couple things could have happened where he got a couple more rounds down into the post-merge, but I just don't think this season was his, just the way kind of the numbers shook out.
Andy?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there are like little things, I think, but I think just established himself so quickly as somebody who is able to galvanize and able to really rally a group of people. And he just was playing really hard. And I think that's really the theme, is people that just were willing to go in game and were excited to game just got targeted for it. Like literally all of them. Wentworth did, Dale did, Jeremy does, Josh does, Reed does. You know what I mean? Like people got villainized for being really outward and open with gameplay. So I just think that I think it's in his nature to really be this, like, he wants to be the figurehead of a group and he wants to be the one calling the shots. And I think that works with some people who are more willing to take that back seat, but this group was really not one of it. And I think he just was such a delicious little target for John. Like John wanted to be the big kahuna so bad. And
yeah.
it was
Jeremy's game, I mean, obviously, Jeremy's game adjusted in a big way in Cambodia with the whole shield strategy.
Yeah.
Jeremy does have a confessional this season, and it's the words that I used to describe the Gabon cast, and he used to describe some people on this season of their cartoon characters.
Yeah.
And I do agree with that. And that's why I always make that comparison to Gabon of like, yeah, these are just a bunch of jamokes that don't know what's going on, and they're just kind of doing. They don't know why they're doing, but they're doing, and we're getting compelling television out of it because I think that if this season goes a different way, we might have another One World type situation. And obviously, rewatching One World this time around, I did see I did have more of an appreciation for it because it's just Kim and a bunch of jabronis. It is Kim, Troyzan. I feel like Chelsea and Sabrina did really well that season. Here, if Jeremy or Josh gain any type of real power in the game, this becomes a steamroll where one of them sits at the end and everyone looks at San Juan. Like, I understand people look at San Juan del Sur as a bad season anyway, which is weird, but I feel like this gets put in like the One World category for the larger fan base if one of them steamrolls their way to the end, because it's just going to be a super fan plays with a whole bunch of people that don't know what they're doing, and they win the game. And everyone's going to say, oh, yeah, Jeremy or Josh or Reed or whoever else, or Kelly Wentworth are the most dominant winner of all time because they play with a bunch of regular folk. And so I'm glad that Jeremy and Josh and Kelly and Reed and all these they did, because it led to a more compelling storyline moving forward where we really don't know who's going to win the game. I feel like the front runners, once Jeremy and Josh leave, probably Reed. Yeah, I'll put Reed in there. I'll feel like Keith might have the social thing going for him. Natalie is up there, but I feel like Jackie or Jacqueline or John are probably up there. It's a very compelling storyline past those first two jurors. We won't talk about what's her name. Oh, Julie. We won't talk about Julie. It becomes a very compelling game from there. And this is still a season and a long line of seasons at this point. I would say going back to One World, where the boot order at the merge, for the most part, are blindsides. And I feel like people forget that with One World, that there were just blindsides just going like this. But from Philippines, Caramoan, Blood versus Water, Cagayan now, it's just people, out there doing what they need to do and voting out the people that they feel. And it's not just one person running the entire thing. It's people trying to do. Then I guess Blood versus Water, the first Blood versus Water, I guess that's a little iffy on that most of those were blindsides, but still. I know we're in this new era, we're in this new era now, of 29, where this is starting to become the norm. Do we feel like this was a good change to the game? The fact that people now felt like, hey, it's blindsides or bust. Did we like this? It's not a rule change. It's just kind of a culture change in the game. Do we feel like this was a good change for you as a viewer and for the players? Andy,
I remember feeling exactly how you described in the very beginning of this merge, where I was enjoying the season. I mean, the pre-merge slugged a little, and I remember being like, ugh, it's going to be Josh or Jeremy. This has been kind of the era of people, rightfully so, playing a great game, stomping to the end. And then Josh goes, and I was like, well, let's sign the check to Jeremy. Congrats. I just couldn't see a world where he wasn't going. And so to have him go, not win, but go next was oh shit. We're it's a little bit more wide open. I do think with this cast, it's funny because it wasn't really intentional, but it did kind of, the way you phrased it did make me think we kind of are it really is a precursor to this world of you have to be playing really hard, and it really is one of the first seasons where threat level management becomes a really tactile thing in the strategy of it. And it obviously wasn't verbalized this season in any way, shape, or form, but I do think it probably was the right time, the evolution of Survivor, for like that to kind of be brought in. And I think that probably is a good thing and a good lesson, I think, for future players to take away.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Kind of just bouncing off of that you kind of get, again, like the natural kind of course of the game where, you're in the very early stage, stages of the show. Again, you're all just kind of learning, how the game works. And once you kind of get like idols put in there and other advantages, the game has to kind of evolve to kind of keep things fresh for not just the players, but for the viewers. So I think, kind of having the quote unquote, like, necessity for blindsides, big moves on the surface might be maybe a big step, but I think to just, again, inject a little different, kind of flavor into the mix. I think you have to evolve with the game. You can't just steamroll the competition, have a majority alliance that just takes everyone out. You have to kind of navigate at times between both sides, the majority and the minority. You have to have a social game where you interact with everyone, not just the people in your alliance. So I think, again, Natalie, in this case, maybe didn't make on the surface big moves, but made the necessary moves and the big moves of the season to stand out from the rest. So I think it's a necessity for any season, any kind of game, to have that be the case where you have to individualize yourself from others, but obviously toning that down enough where you're not, again, like in Josh or Jeremy's case, the targets as a result. So, you have to toe the line a little bit, but I think in general, it is necessary to have in the game in some capacity.
And going off that, they keep referring to it as the Josh Reed Alliance and the Jeremy Alliance. And that is a very big, if your name is being attached to being the leader of an alliance, you're basically screwed unless you are playing Kagayan, basically, because even in that situation, and I talked about this last night, it's like, it's crazy that these people are calling out the fact that this man is a liar and that he's being neurotic and all of that and won't do anything about it. And those people, I feel like that season had more people that understood the game as compared to here, where it's like, okay, yeah, it's the Josh and Reed versus the Jeremy thing, and okay, let's just get rid of them and we'll just start all over again. And I feel like the people in the middle of that are John and Jacqueline. A very compelling duo on this season. They're not the last, they're not the last duo that remains, but I feel like they're the most compelling duo that remains because they are able to navigate through the merge basically like this. They can kind of afford to go back and forth. What did y'all think of the Jacqueline John dynamic? Well, I mean, just to make it easier, Andy, you'll have John, Zucker, you'll have Jacqueline, but you can talk about the couples as a whole as well. But what did we think about them? Because for me, it was my favorite couple on the season. It used to be Wes and Keith, and whatever. But I do feel like they were the most compelling. So what did we think about them?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, in general, whether by their own doing or not, they kind of always found themselves in the middle, between post swap and post merge, in between kind of different factions. So, but focusing on Jacqueline, just going back to her initial start of the game when she was on Coyopa and they kept losing. She was in the minority, did whatever she had to do to make it through the next part of the game. I think once her and John linked up, I think at least my initial impression was, how I remember the season. Oh, John was the one, making the calls, making decisions. Jacqueline was kind of just there along with him, which I found rewatching this season, it was a lot more even keeled, 50-50. And I think in some respects, Jacqueline had a better understanding of the game and the dynamics and the relationships and the moves that should have been made. But John kind of had his blinders on, of what he needed to do to not just get to the game, end of the game and win, but just to take credit for, certain moves. Like in case where Natalie told John to play his idol, and Jacqueline kind of using the phrasing of, basically Natalie, this was Natalie's move more or less. I think it was something that, Jacqueline had more, I think, footing in the game than John did, and wasn't as much of a threat. And yeah, sometimes again just kind of got luck on her side. But I think again in most cases you get to the end for a reason. There are circumstances where you're dragged to the end, but I think in her case she did what she had to do to make the moves necessary to get to the end. And again, just comparing to Natalie, of course, I don't think she played as good a game, but I think she played a decent enough game where in kind of the grand scheme of things, I think she'd have a case to make for, potentially winning the season.
Andy?
It's funny because I feel like John's all those things, Jacqueline. Like he's the opposite. Like I think even if John had gone into the end, I cannot see a world where this cast rewards him. I just feel like the way he always, his like lack of introspection, I felt was really apparent the whole season, and his inability to like not have himself be the main character syndrome. I think he was helped so much by Jacqueline there because she just was his like empathy core for him to like play the game not as like chess pieces in his brain. I think if he's on a regular season, I think he gets like Drewed. Like I think he goes out. I think he's a pre-merge blindside. He almost basically was. I think if their tribe keeps losing really early on, like he was very much not meshing with that group on paper. He wasn't involved in this plan to take Drew out. They were seen very much as like a little strength pair. So I just think John and Jacqueline together were really emblematic, I think, of casting at this time, of getting this all-American pair who, are really excited to go out there and do it and play, and then don't actually. I just feel like John never really had a true pulse, minus like just pure voting blocks. I think he understood where to put numbers and how to kind of like position himself where he always was in the middle, but I don't think he ever really just took consideration of what other people could possibly be doing around him. And so I think he played an impressive middle game. I don't know. It's hard to attribute how much is due to him. It did seem like he really forged a great bond with Missy and Baylor, and he knew how to keep them kind of in his back pocket. And I think that says something. I think maybe something Jacqueline didn't do as successfully, but I just can't see a world where he gets to the end and the jury kind of really. I mean, it depends on who's he's sitting against.
I was going to say it, like, because I have opinions on what you're saying, so I want you to finish so I can.
Yeah, but I just can't see a world where he sells a lot of things he does as intentional that other people wouldn't disprove in that jury. Like even when he plays his idol, he goes, "Oh, I'm so glad I played that," and I'm like, "No, you should be glad that like Natalie told you to play that." Like,
well, even at camp, John's like, "Oh, but I was going to do it anyway." It's like, and I think Natalie even says, "Like, no, you weren't."
Yeah,
no, you weren't.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on if John sits at the end, and so I know, and once again, I say this every episode. I hate fantasy,
right?
Like playing fantasy with this, but let's say John sits at the end and he sits next to Jackie and Natalie. I think John wins just because a few of the men this season are at least sort of being portrayed as bros. And I feel like in that situation, no one's going to give Jacqueline any credit for anything, which is shitty. And so a lot of those votes go to John. I feel like in that situation, Natalie doesn't do what she does, and Natalie, doesn't get credit for anything other than, being able to survive this long by herself and all that and having those social bonds. If he goes to the end with Missy and Baylor, he wins unanimously, probably.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like John or Keith probably win in almost every scenario that doesn't involve them sitting next to each other. Because I think if they sit next to each other and one other person, Keith probably wins just because he's likable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we get a likable winner, not a strategic winner. We get a likable, which is fine. Like I like likable winners. But I was trying to figure that out during the final six and in the finale episode of like, okay, what is a situation where one of them said at the end, what would happen? It's like, I think a man always wins this season.
Yeah.
And instead we get one female juror this entire season, which is crazy because you said there were 18 people. Is it 10 women, 8 men?
It was opposite. It was 10 men, 8 women.
Okay. And I feel like this final three, and it's a final three that doesn't involve an all women's alliance, even though that's what Drew was so afraid of pre-merge. This had nothing to do with an all female alliance. It just kind of happened that way, mainly because Natalie was doing what she was doing in the game. But we get a final three, and I won't say it's the most compelling final three. I think it's a very compelling final two. But Missy and Baylor, and this is the Missy and Baylor segment. Where do you think this concept of Baylor being a brat came from? Because we have the moment where they basically try to throw the challenge so that Missy can go on the reward, where Reed refers to Baylor as a brat. And you can see this has kind of been stewing for a while. This is not just coming out of nowhere. And watching it this time around, I'm looking for moments that would lead a viewer to like understand why this is happening. And I couldn't pick up on anything. I couldn't pick up on anything that was like, okay, why is there this much? And I know that in the large Survivor community, people don't like Baylor and Missy either. I didn't find them that hateable this season. They were fine. Missy, I have to have a crush every season. I guess Missy was my crush by default. But like, there was some pickings, but I had to pick Missy by default. Did we as a whole, y'all can defer on this. Did we like Missy and Baylor? Are they the villains?
I mean, like you said, there wasn't like any standout villains this season. Like, I don't think anyone did anything heinous or evil. But I think if you had to pick someone, some couple, you maybe pick Missy and Baylor. They're the ones that I think kind of benefited by, again, just kind of always having the numbers being in the majority, being the last level one couple. So it's kind of like, by default, they were the ones that you were kind of rooting against. I don't think they did anything particularly, again, like egregious to the players in the game. They didn't curse people out. They didn't, just kind of like stomp on them or use them as chess pieces. Like, I think they, built solid connections and emotional bonds with, certainly the people within their alliance. Yeah, maybe not like the kind of the Alex and the Keiths and the Wesses of the world, but I don't think they were bad to them by any means. So there's probably, again, just a lot of stuff we didn't see, as is the product of just having a 42-minute episode of 3 days. And, I'm sure a lot of stuff at camp was said that we're not privy to. But so I think that's just kind of my take on that.
Yeah, I definitely think we're probably missing a little, I would say. I think that, obviously, I think based on what we saw, like, Reed's speech at Final Tribal feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, I don't think there's anything gameplay-wise or non-gameplay-wise that we showed that from, like, Missy's behavior, but obviously it was enough to warrant Reed to not only say that, but also vote for Jacqueline just so Missy doesn't get the second place money. I, like, just as a viewer, I'm obsessed with Missy and Baylor. I think they bring so much. Like, even their opening moment where Missy's like, yeah, I've been divorced 3 times, and Baylor's been with me through all of them. And I'm like, so true, queen. Like, this is like, they're just so different from any other, like, casting for me. Like, they just, from start to finish, I feel like they were really kind of fun television, kind of like the anti, like, Sierra and Laura, in the sense that they weren't really gamey, but had still that same, like, rough around the edges, like,
I like that comparison. Yeah.
And I think that they're just really, I don't know, they were really fun to watch for me. And I think that they, like, still, like, to your point, even when you said earlier, like, Missy thinking she's going home at 5 when she has her broken foot from the, like, Make-A-Wish immunity challenge, I think is, like, also just objectively hilarious. Like, the whole, like, they're so funny to me. Like, I think that they filled the role, like, perfectly on what the show was. And I think them being kind of these unexpected, like, people that were always constantly in the middle and somehow made all these big moves kind of accidentally, despite them not really knowing how to play, I think is entertainment gold.
And this is kind of straying off topic, but still talking about them. I was spectating an org once years ago. It's probably 3 years ago. And And during the first vote out, some guy gets blindsided, and I'm sitting there watching, because it's live streaming on Facebook. And the kid starts talking, and I'm like, as he starts talking, I'm like, this sounds very familiar. And it wasn't until I heard the phrase "wicked stepmother" then I realized he had said the entire Reed jury speech as his vote out, and going after one of the people that blindsided him. And the first vote of an org, he had because he wasn't reading off screen. He had rehearsed this, I would assume, all day, because he knew he was going home. Instead of scrambling, he rehearsed this and said it directed at one of the women in the game. And I'm sitting there like, that's a weird thing to pull from. You pulled the wicked stepmother speech from watching it this time, a very drunk Reed. Reed has at least had a few drinks up to this point, because his eyes are like this. It's very comparative to like Eric Cardona, or others, where it's like, okay, yeah, they've had, or Alex and Fiji, where it's like, okay, he's had a few drinks. But the fact that that was the speech that he went with has stuck with me for 3 years. The fact that they used Reed's speech. And so, obviously, like you both said, we don't see everything. And I will, and I agree with you. I also feel like they wouldn't. Why would they put that in the season if it has nothing to do with anything? And it goes to what y'all are saying. And it's weird that we didn't get more negative content from Missy and Baylor, only because of that speech. Because now we're sitting there as an audience like, okay, this is really weird that this is coming, like where this is coming from. If they hadn't even just shown us one thing that would show, oh, okay, yeah, they're not the most liked, it would have made a little bit more sense. But that's just nitpicking, because I really love San Juan del Sur. I was thinking about this today. Okay. I want one of y'all to. So we have 5 returnees from this season, right? Jeremy, Natalie, Kelly, Keith, and
that's it, right?
Is it?
Yeah,
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
And they're all in the same. They're on the same starting tribe.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're all in the same starting tribe. And I feel like what I guess bothers me about the perception of the season that it's just shit, and like the casting choices and all that. And it's like, do you forget that we have compared to a lot of other seasons, we have a lot of returnees from the season, including 3 being on second chances. And one of them winning, one of them pulling the big move of the season, and one just being the lovable goof that he was in Keith. Why do we feel like this season gets as much, I won't say hatred, because people don't put it in the Redemption Island category, but I do feel like people put it very low on their lists, and I've never understood why. Because, yeah, people don't know what they're doing. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad season. And like we've all touched on, there are moments, especially post Josh Jeremy, where it just becomes such a great ride. Why do y'all feel like this season is consistently looked at as bottom tier? Let's say bottom tier, not hateable, just bottom tier.
I think maybe because it's such a good Nat story that maybe people feel it's not as competitive is maybe my read on it, is that people wish there was like more of a, I don't know, some people love like a real, I mean, I do too, like a real like tight final tribal where it feels like anybody could win. And it did feel like anybody can win, but not because everybody was playing these amazing stellar games of like anybody could win, because all of the power players got taken out pretty early on. But I don't know. I just think I've never gotten the hate. So it's like, to me, it's like San Juan Star is like my like comfort rewatch. And so, but I think it's just like from the lack of like, I don't know, like just people like actively doing things even really late in the game. Like you don't really see ever Missy and Baylor doing anything like really active. Like I think maybe part of it is just the lack of active gameplay.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like when you look at like other standout seasons, seasons like Kageyama, where the gameplay was, always changing, always evolving, and or a season, like Pearl Islands, where the characters just stand out. You have heroes, you have villains, you have dynamic interactions. So I think this season just didn't have those standout characters, standout moments. Obviously, fans like us, we can kind of study and delve further and kind of analyze things from a different perspective. But just from a kind of just like a casual viewer's perspective, there wasn't anything that I think you can kind of sink your teeth into. It's also, I think, a product of just time. It's been out for so long, and you have more recent seasons that people kind of keep in the forefront of their mind. So it just wasn't something that I think had those standout moments or standout characters. And I think just, again, I don't find it a bad season by any means. I prefer this over a season where there's just more just bad people on the season. This didn't have that. So, yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but that would be kind of my understanding is just, again, it's kind of just like a mediocre season in many respects.
Yeah. The pre-merge is a slog, too. I think that is, like, even as someone that I do adore it, the pre-merge does, minus, like, the Drew boot is obviously, like, a really great, like, fun episode, but, like, Koyopa just is, like, hard. You're just kind of, like, you can't really wrap your head around why people are making decisions they're making. It's not fun to watch the Wentworths implode in a very womp womp way, and then the merge quit, like, just sucks. Like, it does take a little bit to really, like, reap the benefits of its sowing for a while too. So I think that's also part of it, is that some people, like, can't get past the first half.
I also feel like Jeff in production kind of checked out in the season. And the two examples that I have, and we're going to start to wrap up, but two examples that I have are, one, in the next time on Survivor, they just use the first blood versus water graphic every single time. They don't even have it's just blood versus water. It's like, I know that graphic, it's the same one. But two, when we have a quit, Jeff's just kind of like, okay, yeah, you want to quit, that's fine. He doesn't try to shame her or do anything other than, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't want you here anyway. It's almost similar to Lindsay from last season, except for I tweeted this out yesterday. It's like, yeah, except for Jeff probably felt like Lindsay was going to try to kill Trish if she stayed longer. So yeah, I'll let you quit now. With Julie, it's just like, yeah, that's fine. See ya. Yeah, we don't we casted John Rocker because, like you said, stunt casting, but, like, Julie, you were just there because eye candy, I guess. So final two questions that I ask every time. The first question, we've established that we've had 4 people back from this season. Were they the right 4? And do you feel like there could have been other people that could have been brought back where it would have made sense? We're not talking about 50 right now, just 29 to 38, I guess.
Yeah, I think for the 3 that were brought back for second chance, I think in Jeremy, in Wentworth, and in Keith. I think the most questionable one of that bunch would be Wentworth, just because her game this go round was nothing special. She was pre-merge, didn't really have, again, the chance or opportunity to kind of be someone worthy of a second chance. But again, I think we'll all agree, and she made the most of that opportunity. So we're very happy that happened. I think in Jeremy's case, again, had the strategic knowledge, had the in respect social backing to win the game, as evidenced by his second chance season. So I think he deserved that. And I think in Keith's case, he's just a character. Like, again, we can all agree, not the most astute game player, but I think Survivor history would not be the same without having Keith Nail on our screens twice. And then again, in Natalie's case, I think obviously Winners at War, you only have a select group of people, but I think she's a very formidable winner and did a great job in many respects on Winners at War. So I think all 4 of them deserve their opportunity. And if I were to pick, let's say, just one person that hasn't come back from that season that I think I'd like to see, I could pick a few, but I'd be interested to almost see Jacqueline without having a loved one. Again, I think going back to what I said earlier, she really did have, my impression was, a much better footing in the game than I think she was given credit for. So without having John or a loved one there to kind of be tied to, just to have a game she could play freely, and also being, that much older and that much more mature, I think she'd come at the game with a different perspective. And I think it would be interesting to see her a second time around.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the points on who they brought back. I think production was probably like, okay, so many people got boned because they were, stronger players than the rest of this cast. So let's give them another chance where they're not going to be targeted for that. So I think Jeremy and Wentworth coming back was great. It's so bizarre watching this, like knowing what we know now about Wentworth. Like, it's just really fun to see her before she just becomes this, like, basically like the Mount Rushmore for this era. I feel like Wentworth really becomes such a face for the show. But I love that they brought back a pure character. Like, I love that Keith got another chance to like shine again and prove he can, like,
America loved him. Yeah,
I loved him. I mean, he's like, I wish we could have lived in a world where him and Ty could have played together. I would have loved nothing more than to see them like probably like link up in the best way possible. He was amazing when he got to come back again. And then of course I think Natalie proved her own. It is apparently the Anderson curse that you must go out first in some way on a returning season in some capacity. So I think it was amazing for her to continue that legacy. So I think all the choices were correct. I think it's like fun to watch this, to your point. Yeah, what people consider like a lower tier season, like have like these like absolute icons of this era play on it. I don't really think anybody like needs to come back, but I mean, give me one of the chaotic gays. I'd love Joshua Reed to come back. Maybe both of them now that
they're separate. You could have a Wendell Michelle moment.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be really great. I think like of the two, maybe Reed. Reed was a little scrappier. I love that he was able to slowly get footing. I think he could be on a fun little chaotic-y season. And I think at this point, people would forget that he was a little chaotic. So I think he'd do great.
And that obviously leads into my final question of if you had to pick one person from this season, whether they've played 1, 2, or 3 times, who would it, for 50?
Ooh. I think I'm gonna have to do Wentworth. It's hard. Like, I just feel like she kind of like does it all in a great way. I think it's fun to see her be on top. It's fun to see her be on the bottom. I think she can kind of do everything. But it's hard not to pick Jeremy. But I think I have to go with Wentworth.
Yeah, it to me, same thing. It's a toss-up between Jeremy and Wentworth. I think, I don't know. Like, again, I'm not clamoring to see either of them back. I think they both have had like pretty good 3-season arcs where, obviously Wentworth didn't win, but she had a really great showing in Second Chance. Kind of not disappointing, but like, mid-merge kind of showing in her 3rd season. Jeremy kind of followed the same way, did great a 2nd season, kind of went mid-merge his last. But I think they, have kind of shown all that they're capable of in different aspects of the game. So I'll just say Jeremy, just because you said Wentworth, so we'll cover our bases there. But I think both would be great choices for a season 50.
Honest, and obviously this can't happen. I would have said Keith. I feel like Keith would have been like, because 50 can't just have straight game players. Like, they're going to need characters, and I would have said Keith because Keith is probably the ultimate character. But because he's passed, between Jeremy and Wentworth, who I would want to see more, probably the non-winner in that situation, only because I don't want any winners on 50, and I really don't want anyone pre-33 on 50. But because it's the question I've been asking for 29 days now, I would say Wentworth again. I would say if I wanted to pick one person that hadn't played again, probably Josh, just because of the thing that we've been talking about all episode of, it was Josh and Jeremy. They were the game players, and the fact that Josh hadn't come back, it's like, okay, yeah, if they brought back Josh, I'd be cool with it because I would understand why they did it. Or if they wanted to bring back Jacqueline, because one of y'all said, I think it was Zucker, of the fact that she has grown as a person, and we wouldn't have John and his mess. And then Julie, I'm just kidding. So I really appreciate y'all taking the time to do this. I told one of y'all before we went live, I'm really excited to not watch Survivor today because, San Juan del Sur is already done. So this will be the first, I guess I did watch a little bit of Survivor today, but I won't have to watch it all day like I've done the last however many days. So that's nice. But we've got Worlds Apart coming tomorrow. Like I mentioned yesterday, because I won't have Mama C on this time, I don't have to dance around the fact that I hate the season. So that should be fun. I don't think there's any other announcements. Rating. I'm going to give San Juan del Sur a 4 out of 5, which means that it'll be falling in between. It's going to fall in between Panama and Cook Islands on my list. So it'll be at number 14 right now out of 20. What?
29.
Out of 29 seasons. Yeah. Wow. Can't believe, yeah. I just saw the number. I'm just like, wow, I'm not that close to being done, but I am. I am that close to being. I am that close to being done. Zucker and Andy, thank you so much. Two of my favorite people that I've ever met in the entire org community. I've actually gotten a chance to meet Zucker in person. I'm hoping to meet Andy in person sometime soon. Everyone, thank you that actually showed up in the chat today. I understand this is really early, but everyone that listens to this later, thank you. And we will see you all on the other side.